G'day guys, Ryan here from Next Level Adventures and welcome back today to another video. Today I have a pretty cool video for you and actually kind of a rare one. I've never done one like this before, so today I'll be giving you a post-trip rundown and kind of wrap up video on the big 2022 adventure. So today I'll be detailing what we actually did on that trip compared to the trip plan, as well as giving you a run through on how well the Pajeros touring setup went on that trip. So I did completely change this car for that trip and for future trips as well, but that big 12-day trip was the first test for this touring setup. So I'll be running through everything that I was happy with, not happy with, what's changing, and overall how well it went. So of course we are going to start off with the Pajero because that's what everybody's here to see. That's what everyone is probably most excited for. What worked with the Pajero's touring setup, what didn't work, and what is going to change. So before we get into this and detail or any changes that I'm going to do, I think that it's pretty important for me to say that overall I'm actually really impressed with how this setup went. There'll be no major changes per se to this setup. I didn't have any gear that I had a major problem with. I had nothing that I couldn't rely on. There were no breakages or no failures or anything like that with the gear that I had chosen. All of the changes that I'll be doing are slight changes, minor things that will really just improve the setup and make things a little bit more convenient for me when I'm out on these longer and more remote trips. So of course that is why we build these trucks and why we have setups like this, is so that they can accommodate us and always improve for if we choose to go on those big remote trips. Even though I didn't technically go very remote for this trip, I definitely had the ability to stock up if need be and all that sort of stuff. This setup is built to accommodate trips like that if I wanted to, and so having tested out this gear now on a trip like that, where time-wise it would be similar, but location-wise would be different. So where I did have the ability to restock if something was to go wrong, it was very good. And so I took a few notes from that, and then now I'll be making some slight improvements. So to start off, the improvement list is right here in the back. So you will notice that I did have a Boab 40-litre poly water tank right here in the back. Now this is the most significant change to the entire setup, and realistically the only thing that has been taken out and replaced. So in the back here I did have that. Now I bought that before I got the rooftop tent, and the issue that I had with that Boab tank was actually really minor. So you will see a video next week detailing the issue that I had with that in more detail, but I'll give you a little brief rundown. In the center of that Boab tank there was a little arch that was designed to accommodate the tank on the back on the floor here where it sits in the rear footwell, and basically that arch prevented water from being drained from one side of the tank. So in order for that to work ideally, I would have had to have both sides plumbed up, and I couldn't do that because the ladder to the rooftop tent goes right here. So I needed something that was going to work from one side of the vehicle, hence why I've now replaced that with this Boab 55-litre water tank that does not have that arch in the middle and can be drained from one side of the vehicle. So while we're talking about the rear setup of the car and how I packed it for the trip, with the rear seats down, I had the console fridge in the back here, air compressor toolkit on top of the water tank. That is not changing. That actually worked really well, and with this updated water tank it actually puts the console fridge right here in a better position. Throughout the whole trip I was having issues opening this fridge because it would rub on the back of the seat due to where it was sitting before. The old water tank was shorter than this one. This one sits a lot taller, and now this fridge is actually wedged in a really good position in between the back seat and the water tank. So definitely really happy with how that has turned out. I think that that is going to be the only change that is going to be classed, I guess, as significant for this setup. It is the only thing that I have taken out and completely replaced. So I'm really happy that we went out and fronted the money for this console fridge. It really worked a treat having that there, having all the drinks in that fridge. instead of having to always open the big fridge. This big Waco that I have in the back of the Pajero, if it's continuously opened and closed just for drinks, it will always pull temperature and is a massive, massive drawer. Having this little console fridge that really doesn't draw that much and can handle being open and closed a lot, because of that, doesn't take a lot of power to get it back down to temperature compared to the big fridge, was really worth every single cent. It meant basically that we had a continual low temperature in there, which put our food at less risk. Obviously, the more you open and close the fridge, the higher the temperature goes, and you obviously cannot have food at a high temperature for very long. So I think that that is one thing that I'm really, really pleased about. So moving over to the second slight thing that I'll be changing on this setup, and that is right up here on the awning. So the awning is positioned a little bit too far away from the back of the car. So in the rain that we had up at Dorrigo, there was a slight leak in between the back of the vehicle and the awning, where the awning wasn't covering the back fully, and that meant that, well, pretty much some of the stuff in the back got a little bit wet. So just very easy fix. I've just got to move the awning that way a little tiny bit, about that much, but other than that, there's really nothing else that I've had a problem with. Well, that is of course besides down here. If you watch episode 2, the Gardens of Stone National Park, the very first time that I got bogged, I did bend this side step. However, it's not very noticeable, so realistically I would love to change them over to some steel rock sliders, but it is not on the top of the list. And now we move into the back, and I have to say I am so impressed with this setup and how it worked. Just the convenience of this made life so much easier. Having this pull-out camp kitchen as well, definitely the highlight. So it was so easy for me to pull up, pop the rooftop tent, roll the awning out, and have this rolled out as a table and have dinner on within 10 minutes. It just made life so much easier. It was such a really convenient thing to have. It was so much less of a hassle to get dinner on and get all that stuff sorted out. In terms of storage, I did have enough storage in these drawers, and they are still pretty well packed, exactly how they were on that trip. And that's another thing that I really like about this setup and how I've set it up, is that, well, everything kind of permanently lives in here. So I could very easily, with minimal effort, pack up and be on the road for another 2-week adventure pretty swiftly. So another thing to note that I am really impressed with, besides the console fridge, actually is the EnerDrive 100 amp hour lithium battery. So before we left, we did actually have a few little 12 volt problems to do with the fuses on that setup. I did make a little YouTube short about that. But basically the setup was a little bit underfused, and we were having issues with the fuse popping every couple of minutes, literally. So I upped all the fuses on that setup, and it ran like a dream. I had no issues, and on my Bluetooth battery monitor running this big 80-litre ancient Waco, the EnerDrive battery literally would go down about only 20% overnight, compared to previously the old AGM battery that was in here. The battery would be drained down completely almost overnight. So going from 100% to 80% compared to going from 100% to almost flat, I think is astronomical. That's just shows you the potential of lithium power setups. It's only 100 amp hour lithium on a 40 amp charger that I even dialed down to 35 amps, and it was still running this fridge and all the other accessories, and only going down 20% of charge overnight. I thought that that was absolutely fantastic. So as always, I was really impressed with how the old Goodyear Wranglers went on this trip. Had absolutely no issues with them. They handled all the terrain really well, no punctures or anything like that. And yeah, I was really happy with them. The road noise on these tires is actually really, really good, and that's why I'm probably lining up a second set of these at the moment when they get down. So they've done their fair share of kilometers and off-road kilometers as well. So yeah, really happy with how they went. No issues at all with the Goodyear Wranglers, and they'll definitely be staying on the truck. Now, another piece of equipment that I absolutely cannot fault and am really happy with, the old custom off-road 3mm stainless bash plate. This thing did take a fair copping the first couple of days when we were in the New State Forests and Gardens of Stone National Park. Still in perfect condition, still protecting the truck just fine. So now, one of the most important things with the setup that I just cannot brush over. How did we go up here in the Drifter Wildlands? This rooftop tent really revolutionized the way that I camp. I don't think that I would have had anywhere near as good of a trip that I did if I didn't have this rooftop tent. This thing sets up in literally like 2 minutes. So any spot that we were in, I pulled up, had this popped up within 2 minutes. I could have gone to bed if I needed to. The view from up here in some of the spots is absolutely spectacular, considering the fact that I'm raised so far off the ground. It was really good being up here, especially on the beaches where there's a lot of sand around, and climbing up the ladder, you pretty much get all the sand off you before you're in the rooftop tent, unlike the swags. As well as when it got wet, the soft floor design meant that the tent was pretty much dry by the time that I got to camp, even if it was still raining while we were driving. So it's obvious that this isn't going anywhere, and the only thing that I'll be changing up here is getting the mattress upgrade. Now, it's not bad, and I definitely could keep putting up with it if I was just going out on overnighters. However, for other longer trips that I am planning, I could definitely benefit from the mattress upgrade. I think that it is very well going to be worth the money. So that is what I'll be doing up here. Other than that, nothing needs to be changed up here. I was so happy with how this rooftop tent performed on that trip. I would definitely recommend it to anyone, and I think we're actually going to put one on the Ranger. Well, that is going to do us for the post-trip setup rundown on the Pajero. Overall, very happy with it, and as you've heard, only a few minor changes that'll be happening, all in the due course of time though, as we gear up for the next big adventure. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to leave a like on the video as well as subscribe so that you don't miss any updates on the Pajero, as well as any of the big adventures that we are going to be going on. Of course, leave your thoughts down in the comments section below if you have any suggestions for the Pajero and what you think would suit it for the next big adventure. Feel free, leave them down in the comments section below. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next adventure.